Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? I would say this is the biggest draft weekend of the year.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably, I would say it might be.
Weekend or this weekend.
Yeah, I think last weekend was a big one. But because it's a Labor Day weekend, I feel like a lot of people are definitely drafting this weekend.
Yeah, you get the time off, and it's good. But I'm getting excited because I am. We talked about this literally all week. Rick has made fun of me for it, but for some reason, all of my drafts happen to be 3 days before the NFL season starts.
Oh yeah.
So,
which is crazy.
I'm excited because all I do is mock drafts, and I'm kind of getting I'm getting antsy. I want a real draft. I want these situations to come out in full force in a real draft. But as we head into this weekend, we have two more draft related or fantasy draft related shows that we're going to bring to you. It's late round targets. And the final one is do not draft players that we're not drafting and you shouldn't draft either. So those are the two final shows that are related to draft content. And then next week, it's all about week one. So
yeah,
going to be interesting. But and of course, there is no waiver wires. There is no waiver wires for next week.
No.
Of course. But we will have waiver wire shows. And that'll be very soon, yes. But before we do that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platforms, please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below any questions you may have for us. And I noticed we get comments with people hating on. We're giving you advice on what to do.
Are you saying we're getting a lot of haters?
No, just the occasional. I think it's kind of funny when people comment rude things on videos. I find it kind of entertaining. But I'm like, this is what we would actually do in a draft, and we win.
Right.
So anyway,
no, I like hate comments because usually, if you ask them why, sometimes they'll give a fair explanation, but a lot of times they just won't at all.
This guy comments, "Your personal lives are terrible. Nobody cares. Stop trying to be interesting. Just talk fantasy football."
I love that, actually.
It's so ruthless. Greg Souls, we appreciate the comment.
But,
that's hilarious.
under that, there was a little bit of, he likes listening to us because he wants us to talk about fantasy football.
Oh, he just wants us to get right in.
Right.
Oh, that was the episode where I talked about losing weight. Thanks, Greg.
Oh, that's not nice.
That's not very nice, guy. Or, I mean, maybe that was a second show and maybe I'm just making things up. I don't know. Could be. I don't know. But anyway, we'll take Greg's advice into account and just get right to it. Why not?
Okay.
So today we're going to talk about late round targets. I talked a little bit about this on the last show, discussing the fact that, the late rounds in drafts are super crucial to your fantasy team. We'll throw in a couple of guys in the super late rounds at the end of the show, maybe a couple guys that Rick likes and that I like, because these guys are between rounds 9 and 12, the guys that we have listed here. So,
yeah, I think the latest is 11.
They don't go super deep, so we'll reference some guys that we've been drafting. Rick can yell at me, I can yell at him, but the late rounds are super important because it builds a bench for your team, and a lot of people overlook this aspect of the draft, and I personally think it's as important, if not more important, than what you do in the early rounds, because frankly, the early rounds are the easiest part. It's people overthink the first 3 rounds, and I see this all the time. People overthink the first 3 rounds of a draft, and then they get to the last rounds, and they're like, oh, I'm just going to draft a defense and a kicker and some random guy that was
I'm gonna
ends up
draft
on the practice squad 3 weeks later. So it's
Right.
they just randomize it and they don't give a crap. And then they get to the season and 3 of their starters get hurt and they don't have a bench, or they can't
Right.
make a trade because no one wants their crappy bench players. So this is there's an extremely crucial portion of the draft. I always try to make sure that my benches are really, really good as well, so that you can transition that into making big trades in your league, getting top end talent. And it is hard because you don't know which guys are going to work. So we're going to try to give you that, the advice that you need to hear for your particular fantasy leagues. We almost put Kenneth Walker on the Do Not Draft show. So it would have been funny if we had Rashaad Penny on late targets and the other one. But anyway, with that being said, did you have anything to say before we get started? Because I already said the first one.
No, I think we can get going. Once we do if we do a little section for the late round guys,
Yeah.
we probably won't agree on it, so we're probably just gonna name off a couple guys that we personally
and
target.
outrage. I'll be like one of the commenters.
Yeah.
So number 1 on our list, as I said, in no particular order, this is not like a ranked list, but is Rashaad Penny. For me, I noticed that as I was getting to the later rounds in drafts, because his ADP, I believe, is, let me check really quick, it's right around Kenneth Walker's. Yeah, I think it's 81.
Who is it?
Rashaad Penny.
For Penny?
Oh, 89. Sorry, 89. So his ADP is 89. And I found that this guy actually, I would say, is one of those late round target gems, because if you look at how he produced at the end of the 2022 fantasy football season, he actually was very, very good. And throughout the whole, pretty much the whole season, he was consistent. Hold on a second. That's the projection. I'm looking at the wrong season. 2021. I was like, why are all these 11 points?
And I was gonna correct you, and then I was like, I'm just gonna let him go because he probably just accidentally said it. But you were actually looking at.
I was actually looking at projection numbers on Sleeper. At the end of last season, he had from weeks 15 to 18, he had 11, 11, 12, and 12. So, and he scored 6 touchdowns over that stretch of 5 games. And so he was pretty consistent. He produced, great fantasy numbers. And he was actually kind of breaking onto the scene, the Rashaad Penny that I think a lot of people wanted for the most part in fantasy football over the first 4 years of his career. So now going into this next year, everything that I've been hearing from Pete Carroll and from the coaching staff and from the Seattle Seahawks has been that Penny is the guy. And this team is going to be very similar to the Cleveland Browns, where they're going to run the ball into the ground. So I anticipate that Rashaad Penny, if he's healthy and he plays the whole season, that he will start the whole season and that he will produce really good fantasy numbers. And I think the value that you, at least RB2, and the value that you get drafting him at pick 90 is great. Like, you don't get many starting running backs there. So if you go 0 running back, this is one of the guys that I would have, if I went 0 running back, this is one of the guys I would have starting probably in my second running back slot. But I think in pretty much every draft, there's an opportunity in the 9th, 10th round or 8th round for me to draft Rashaad Penny. I've been doing it. So I would suggest that you do too here in the late rounds.
Yeah, it's a good pick. Penny has always been a talented guy. She's about staying on the field. But reports are early in training camp, and I believe Pete Carroll actually quoted saying that he wanted to give Penny 20 carries a game, or that he thinks Penny's the 20 carry a game kind of guy.
Yeah.
People will say, well, they drafted Kenneth Walker. They want him to be the guy. But the way Pete Carroll specifically and the Seahawks have run things, they don't really do that. They kind of like Chris Carson. It's Rashaad Penny took over at some point. They really give it to the hot hand, and usually the veteran gets the first crack at it. You could even look at the quarterback competition with Geno Smith.
You could look at the same thing. Penny went in the first round when they drafted him, and
Chris Carson, undrafted guy, took over. But yeah, Penny is going to get first crack at it. and he's going to be carrying the ball a lot. I've talked about how I don't really like the Seahawks offense this year. I don't really want to invest in the team. But that's especially true for the passing. And when it comes to the running game, it's a little different because I do think they're going to run the ball a lot this year, especially with Geno Smith at quarterback. They're already a run-first team with Russell Wilson. So with a guy like Geno Smith, and if they end up going to Drew Lock at some point, either way, they're going to be running the ball a lot. So there will be a lot of opportunity for Penny to start the year. I don't know about his ceiling with his injury concerns and Kenneth Walker and all those things. But like you said, you're getting a starting running back in the 8th or 9th round when pretty much the last starting running back goes in like the 5th or 6th.
And so, I would like to say, too, I don't know what numbers I was reading a second ago. But
people fake numbers.
I read the wrong numbers. I don't even know where I saw the numbers I read.
Oh, you gotta...
Dude, I'm collapsing here on Sleeper. I mean, this is absurd.
It's okay.
I should just look at this on another platform. At the end of the season, from week 14 to 18, he had 26, 6, 19, 32, and 25. That sounds a lot better than what I said.
Yeah, I don't know what were you looking at a different year?
And the numbers I read aren't even here.
Can I tell you where he ranked among running backs from week 14 to 18?
Go ahead.
He was the RB1 in fantasy.
Yeah. So, like, not only
in all of fantasy,
it's one thing when you look at a guy like, for example, Dameon Pierce, who's been hyped up. He ends up in that, like, I would say at this point, by the time you get to your drafts this weekend, he'll probably be in the same vicinity as Rashaad Penny.
He'll probably be higher.
He might even be higher. And so it's like you look at a guy like Dameon Pierce, who's on a not-so-great football team, and people expect him to get the opportunity, and all the moves would suggest that he's going to get the opportunity. People love Dameon Pierce, young guy with talent. They want to get him the ball. Whereas Rashaad Penny's situation's a little bit different. He's been in the league for a little while, but he has something a little bit different. He's getting the opportunity, and he also showed what he can do with the opportunity. Because if you're all like, oh, Seattle sucks, the offense sucks, why would you draft a running? Look, was Seattle's offense good last year?
No, not really.
I mean, it's going to be worse probably, but like...
It will be, but he's not going to be number one RB either.
Right. But it's like you've seen him produce at a good production level. He's the RB1 of the team. Like, they're going to give him the starting snaps. And you don't get many starting running backs in the 9th round.
Mm-hmm.
So, or 8th round. So that, I think Penny's a great target. I think, regardless of whether you go 0 running back or not, I think it's a great pick in the later rounds. Because there's just like when you look at this range of running backs, you have like Kenneth Walker, Rashaad Penny, obviously. We have Dameon Pierce, who's rising up, Ramondre Stevenson, second running back on the Patriots, Melvin Gordon, second running back on the Broncos, James Cook, second running back on Buffalo. Like, these are all secondary running backs. Michael Carter, secondary running back on the Jets. Madison, second running back on Minnesota.
Tony Pollard and Kareem Hunt are going ahead of him in drafts.
Yeah, and it's like
RB2s.
So it's like, this is not like, I mean, he's had a history with injuries, so there's other aspects and reasons why he's getting drafted lower. But I think for Penny, he's got a really good shot if he stays healthy the whole season to ascend into like a mid-range RB2 status, possibly higher if he does what he did at the end of last year. And to get that in the 9th round, I think it's great. It's worth the shot. There's not a ton of risk tied to it. If he gets hurt, I mean, what are you losing? A 9th round, 8th round pick? You know what I mean? Like, they have the same amount of risk as everyone else. So I would take the risk on Penny.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I would too.
Next guy that we have on this list is Trey Lance. And we've talked about Trey Lance as a breakout quarterback. We talked about how you should draft him if you bypass several of the quarterbacks. I would say in my rankings, I would probably have guys in no particular order: Josh Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, Jackson, Murray, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Russell Wilson, all ahead of Trey Lance, and then Trey Lance would slot in that next spot.
So like QB 8?
Yeah, somewhere in that vicinity. But if I'm not getting, like, in the 6th round, if I can't get Jalen Hurts, I go for Trey Lance. If I can't get Russell Wilson, in that same vicinity, then I would go Trey Lance. So it's just like, sometimes I even go Trey Lance over Russell Wilson. It's crazy, but it's dangerous out here. But it is, I think, an interesting point to bring up for a lot of people, because if you want to go to our breakout show, we talk a lot about Trey Lance on that show. So you can see the details of that. But I think what's interesting is that lately there's been some weird moves by San Francisco. They re-signed Jimmy Garoppolo, and I don't know if you've been following anything from 49ers camp, Rick, but Jimmy G was pretty much non-existent in anything that they were doing. They told him not to show up. They told him to show up and just work out and then leave.
Wasn't he hurt though too?
There was a rumor that he was hurt, and then there was also
he had off-season surgery, right?
Yeah. But he was out there like ready to go to practice, and then the team was like, "No, we don't want you practicing with the team." And they go through all of this, and then they re-sign him as a backup quarterback.
That's super super weird.
Now,
not gonna lie.
The 49ers put themselves in an impossible situation. So I think their only course of action at this point was either cut Jimmy G and watch him go to Seattle, or keep Jimmy G on a new contract and then get a compensatory pick next year for him when he does leave. So I think that was the initial plan for them, is that they weren't getting a 3rd, 4th round, 5th round pick for him. So, getting a compensatory pick for Jimmy G next year and holding on to him for an offseason and just paying, fronting the bill a little bit for one season to do that and at least get something for him is a smart move for San Francisco. But they re-signed him, and now you kind of have a situation where it's a little bit more interesting. You have your starting quarterback in Trey Lance, who you've definitely said, like, hey, this is our guy, with a guy looking over his shoulder. You look at Patrick Mahomes. He took over. Alex Smith was gone, right? Was another situation. There was like 2 other situations I had in my head, and I can't remember them.
I mean, Rodgers and Favre, kind of.
Rodgers was... Yeah, Favre was gone. He left. There was one in the actual NFL currently. Was it Joe Flacco? As soon as Lamar was ready, they canned
Joe.
Joe.
I think so.
But anyway,
there's examples we're missing.
Usually the quarterback that you take over for after sitting behind somebody for a year gets canned the next year. And the 49ers are like, hey, we're going to keep Jimmy. It's kind of a little bit weird. Kind of and now Trey Lance,
Mac Jones and Cam Newton. I guess. Well, they didn't keep him.
They cut him before the season started. But now Trey's looking over his shoulder, going, okay, if I suck, they're gonna put Jimmy Garoppolo in. If we're not winning football
it is
games,
interesting.
Then so that is kind of in the back of your mind, but I would not be concerned about that. I still have faith that Trey Lance is going to be really good. I think they spent so much draft capital on him.
Well,
it would be stupid for them to throw him on the field. And
they're not gonna he would have to be so bad for them to take him out for Garoppolo. He'd have to be horrible, because even if he's not that good, let's say he's like slightly below average. Yeah, I don't think they would take him out for Garoppolo.
No, I don't.
You would have to take a lot.
You got to at least stick with the kid for 1 year, and if it's clear that he's not the guy, then you made a mistake and you got to move on from that. But for me, I don't think that they would go unless they were winning football games and Trey Lance was not the reason and he just kind of sucked, and they wanted to try to win more games to make the playoffs, and then they would, I think, maybe replace him with Jimmy. But with that being said, I don't with Jalen Hurts last year, I was nervous all season because I felt like he was going to be bad enough for them to bench, but he was also a 2nd or 3rd round pick, so it didn't really matter for the Eagles. They were like, you know what? If we suck, we can go out and draft a guy. For the 49ers, they gave up 3 first-round picks for this kid.
Yeah.
So, to me, it's like they're going to play him, and they're not turning back. So I don't have a problem with Trey Lance. He's the 2nd-year quarterback with the most opportunity to break out and have success. He's a rushing quarterback. He has, I think, the best team around him of all of the rookie quarterbacks, or the 2nd-year quarterbacks, I should say now. With the 2nd-year quarterbacks, he's got the best roster. He's got the best players. He's got the best opportunity. He's a rushing quarterback. This is the guy that's built for fantasy football, and I'm excited to see what he can do in 2022. And win your league. And for me, to be honest with you, this is one of my favorite late round quarterback selections because like you don't even have to worry about taking a Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson or a top level quarterback. You can just take Trey Lance in the 9th and save that pick for a skill position player that you definitely need.
Right. Well, we've talked about Lance before, and you make some good points, so I won't go too far. But basically, we all know rushing is king for quarterbacks. Last year, the leading rusher was Jalen Hurts. Would have been Lamar. He only played in 12 games. But Jalen Hurts, to put it in perspective, had 139 carries last year, which led the NFL among quarterbacks. Trey Lance, in the 3 games that he mostly played, he came in for Garoppolo against Seattle. He started against Arizona, and he started against Houston. In those 3 games, if you add up his rushing totals and then divide it by 3 times 17 to do some quick math, so basically pace it out to a 17-game season, he would have had 175 rushing attempts, which was 40 more than.
I don't even think he started a full game, did he?
And Trey Lance is the type of quarterback we've seen in the preseason where he'll miss. But basically, what we've seen in his very short NFL career so far. But even if he misses throws, he gets sacked on a play, stuff that you may not like. He's the type of player that's going to run, and he's going to the type of player that's going to make big plays, throws down the field, big 30-yard run, a 50-yard pass. So those things are good for fantasy. So purely fantasy-based, he should get a lot of rushing attempts, and he should have enough passing yards and enough touchdowns where he's going to be a very good fantasy player, despite maybe what his completion percentage is, or how many interceptions he throws, or how many sacks he takes.
I mean, Jalen Hurts, real NFL, was not a great quarterback last year.
Exactly.
Now,
and Trey Lance has
doesn't really matter.
A better team around him than Hurts did last year.
Yeah. So I think unless this kid is just an abysmal failure, it's almost a sure breakout. Like I don't know. 2018 Patrick.
He would have to
vibes.
really be bad.
Yeah,
really be bad.
Next guy that we haven't spent a whole ton of time on is Robert Woods. And so last year, he actually, a funny thing that I heard the other day, he was being drafted before, because he was on the Rams, and he was being drafted before Cooper Kupp.
He was. You don't remember that?
Nope.
They were in the same round. They were in the same round. It was like ridiculous. This year's Sutton and Judy.
So, yeah, which is scary.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, what the frick? Oh, you have Sutton and Judy both. Maybe I should just take both, yeah. But anyway, so, Robert Woods gets traded to, this offseason gets traded to, I think he dealt with injuries last year, correct?
Yes, he tore his ACL.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So anyway, he comes into this season. He gets traded to the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee trades A.J. Brown for a pick, and they use that pick on Treylon Burks. Now, Burks has also been one of our favorite guys this year. He's one of those rookie wide receivers that I think which rarely happens, but gets opportunity in year one. And I think he could be good too. But right now, what the reports out of camp is Robert Woods is the number 1 wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. And that Treylon Burks is like the 3rd guy, I would say. So at this point, like they run a lot of 11 personnel. So you're going to see 2 wide receiver sets on the field, which means they're going to start with that, the slot receiver that everyone's been talking about in their camp. And
Kyle Phillips.
Is it Kyle Phillips?
Yep.
He's a 2nd wide receiver on the team. So they're going to probably go with him and Robert Woods to start games. That's the only problem with 11 personnel. So, like, you're not going to see Treylon Burks unless the Tennessee Titans are losing. Hopefully they start him in games and get him out there, but, whatever.
I think it's just going to start slow. Like, he's not. I don't think he's going to start the first, 2 or 3 weeks of the year, and then they're going to throw him out there, and he's going to put up big numbers. But
Robert Woods coming off an ACL injury is a little bit concerning. that's one of the things you have to factor into his, draft stock and expectations. Typically guys, whether wide receivers or running backs, they struggle coming off that ACL injury, so it is a little bit more disconcerting for Robert Woods. But I think at the value that you're getting him at, which is like 9th, 10th round, it's okay.
Yes.
Right. Like you're not, it's not like you're investing a high level draft selection in a guy that tore his ACL, and trying to draft Robert Woods in the 4th, 5th round. You're getting him in the 9th, 10th round. So, I like him because, usually you get this late in drafts, and it's, I was talking about Rashaad Penny earlier. Robert Woods is one of those examples where when you get this late in drafts, you don't typically see a number 1 wide receiver on their football team get drafted. You know what I mean? And especially a team who has carried a wide receiver 1 in the past. Robert Woods still has it. There's no reason to believe that he doesn't, unless this ACL injury really does affect him.
This year will show if he doesn't.
This year will show if it doesn't. But for me, I think Robert Woods is a great player. He can play. He's a little bit smaller, but he can play a similar role to AJ Brown. And I think that they'll get him the ball. And being the only target on the team, his target competition is Kyle Phillips and what the frig is their tight end's name? Or bust last year. Austin Hooper. So it's Austin Hooper or Robert Woods that they're going to throw the ball to. And I don't know. My guess is that they'll go with Robert Woods.
Yeah.
So I'm drafting Robert Woods whenever I get the opportunity in the later rounds. It gives you a solid bench addition, a guy that you can stick in your flex or your wide receiver 2 slot if you need it.
Yeah, I've been the same way. I mean, again, he's going in the 9th, late 9th, early 10th round right now. And how many wide receiver 1s on team are going in that range?
Right.
I think he might be the one of maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Like most wide receiver 1s are gone by like this 5th or 6th round.
Yeah.
So it's kind of similar to Penny in that stance. And Woods, I think, is still good. A lot of people have said like, oh, he was disappointed last year. Like you should have drafted Cooper Kupp. Those things are true, but I think people forget, because of how good Cooper Kupp was the first 9 weeks of the season, Woods was still decent. He just disappointed because he wasn't Cooper Kupp. He was the wide receiver 12 last year before he tore his ACL, with Cooper Kupp being the wide receiver 1 still in the whole league. They had 2 top 12 receivers. So it wasn't like Woods was awful. Then he tore his ACL, and now he's with the Titans in a much less passing offense. But again, not a lot of mouths to feed there. So are they going to throw the ball a lot? No. But Robert Woods is going to get a lot of the opportunity there when the opportunity presents itself.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think he's going to be there's already been reports in camp that him and Tannehill have a small connection. I think he's going to be like the 3rd down guy. When Tannehill is in trouble, he's going to look for Robert Woods. Like he's the security blanket in that offense. And a little note that I don't know if the Titans are going to use him like this, but the Rams have always used him like this. Historically speaking, Robert Woods also gets a decent amount of carries on the ground. 2018, he had 19 carries and a touchdown, 157 rushing yards. 2019, 17 carries, a touchdown, 115 yards. Yeah. 2020, 24 carries, 155 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. And even last year, he had a rushing touchdown on 48 yards through 9 games. So he could get additional fantasy points through the ground if the Titans decide to use him like that on end arounds and even plays out of the backfield. I don't know if Tennessee will use him the same way, but it's a possibility. And it's someone who doesn't have a lot of risk being where he's getting drafted where he's drafted.
Yeah, I agree. Number 4, we have Cole Kmet. I accustomed this one to, and like I said, we had a breakout show. I believe we put Cole Kmet on that breakout show, so be sure to check that one out. But Cole Kmet, I think, is, we have a barometer for tight ends generally where you want to make sure where they are on the target tree. Like Patrick Mahomes has Travis Kelce. In the past, he's had Tyreek Hill. And, Travis Kelce's always been the number 2 option, right? If you're a number 2 option or even maybe like a high-level number 3 option, typically you can call a breakout on that. The year Darren Waller broke out, it was like there's no one in this receiving core that can take that step. Darren Waller was the only guy. and you're like, okay, this guy can break out. Mike Gesicki, the year he kind of had a big season, Rick and I looked at it and we were like, oh, he's probably going to be the number 2 target or the number 1 target on the team. Mike Gesicki broke out last year.
The year Austin Hooper, same thing.
Yeah. So it's like
with the Falcons,
you have to look at the team and be like, okay, which players in the late rounds, especially if you're trying the late round quarterback strategy, which players can I snag in the later rounds or which tight ends can I snag in the later rounds have that opportunity in an offense? And I think Cole Kmet's a clear player in that route tree, being the number 2 guy for the Chicago Bears, because the Bears right now have virtually nobody as their second wide receiver. It's like Death Valley over there. So I think Cole Kmet is the second target on the team. I think he's going to be a big red zone target. Justin Fields went absolutely bonkers in a preseason game against the Eagles. Was it the Eagles? It doesn't even matter.
I forget who he played, yeah.
But he scored 3 touchdowns. He was 14 of 16. 2 touchdowns went to tight ends. One of them was Cole Kmet. So there's a really, really, really good shot that Cole Kmet ends up being the tight end, not just the tight end one for the team, but a second target on the team in the route tree. He's going to look at Darnell Mooney and he's going to look at Cole Kmet, which is going to increase his target share, and he's also going to get those red zone targets. So with that being said, I think Cole Kmet has a really great chance of breaking out, but not just that, I think he's a great late round target because you can get him in the 10th round. I basically kind of look at this as like he's a poor man's version of what TJ Hawkinson is, in a way. Like, would you rather have TJ Hawkinson in the 6th round or get the same player, Cole Kmet, in the 11th round?
I'd rather Cole Kmet in the 11th.
I'd rather have Cole Kmet in the 10th or 11th too. So Cole Kmet, great late round target.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. Last year he had 93 targets, and was second on the team in targets, with Allen Robinson still on the team, who had 66 targets. So you take that away, there's a decent amount of vacated targets on the Bears, and he had 93 targets. The only reason he didn't break out last year was the 0 touchdowns, which we've talked about before is not happening again. The team only had 16 total passing touchdowns last year, and 2 of them went to a tight end that had 2 receptions total. Yeah. So it was 2 goal line touchdowns. And Jimmy Graham was on the team last year. Jimmy Graham had 3 touchdowns. So, those things will not happen again this year. I expect Fields, even if you don't think Fields is going to have a great year, I think you would probably expect more than 16 passing touchdowns out of the second-year quarterback. So with those things in mind, not to mention that he's in a year 3 prime position to break out for a player, has improved every year. The opportunity is there. The talent is there. I mean, to me, this is one of the easiest home run picks. And I don't think he's going to be a top 5 tight end, but if you draft him in like the 10th round, he's going to put up the same production as guys who are going ahead of him in like the 6th, 7th, 8th round all do. So you're basically saving a round or 2 on the tight end position. Yeah,
I agree. I have him projected right now at 150 plus fantasy points, which isn't a ton, but last year through 18 weeks, the tight end 5 had 143 fantasy points, Zach Ertz. So it isn't that hard for a guy like Cole Kmet to jump into that conversation. And if you have a top 5 tight end in fantasy football, you got a little bit of a cheat code over there. Final guy that we'll talk about, and I'll let Rick take the floor on this one because I kind of want to hear his arguments. But it is Christian Kirk, who's a decent late round target. I believe he's going in the same round as Robert Woods. Is that correct?
He's going 1 pick higher.
1 pick higher than Robert Woods. So same round as Robert Woods, wide receiver 1 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Rick, give us why he's a great late round target.
This is a gross one. Some people won't like this one, but I think he's one of the best late round targets because of his situation with the Jaguars. So the Jaguars have one of the most vacated targets in the league, I believe. Let me double check before I start just saying stuff. I guess not. They're in like the top half of the league though in vacated. They still have 161 vacated targets. They just traded Laviska Shenault. So the offense there, the wide receiver group is Christian Kirk, Marvin Jones, and Zay Jones. And then that's it. They're going to probably do some 2 tight end sets. Travis Etienne will get some passing work, but that's pretty much it. So he's in line for the Jaguars this year to have a monster season for target share. In the preseason, his target share with the starting group was almost 40%, which is not going to happen in the regular season, but it just shows you how much Trevor Lawrence looks Christian Kirk's way. He looks for him on almost every single play in the preseason when they were starting on passing plays. Almost half the plays, he was looking for Christian Kirk. So if Christian Kirk ends up with like 140, 150 targets and Trevor Lawrence has a year 2 jump, he's going to be a guaranteed like wide receiver 2 week in, week out that you're getting in the 10th round. He's the wide receiver 1 on the team. And you could almost make the argument that he's in a better spot than Robert Woods because I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a better year than Ryan Tannehill. I don't know if that's a hot take or...
I think Trevor Lawrence might have a better year than Ryan Tannehill, but I don't know if the offense is well. I don't think the Jacksonville Jaguars offense will be.
I don't think that will necessarily matter if we're just talking purely passing offense. Like, yeah, the Titans will have a better rushing offense than the Jaguars, so they might have a better overall offense because of that. But I think Trevor Lawrence could put up more yards and touchdowns than Ryan Tannehill in the passing game. And if that happens and Christian Kirk gets the target share, even he's not going to get the preseason target share, but even if he gets like close to that, like 75% of that, he's going to be very fantasy relevant.
Yeah.
And like Marvin Jones isn't getting a high target share. Zay Jones is not getting a high target share. Evan Ingram is Evan Ingram. So he might be your second target, maybe your third. And then I think Etienne will have a pretty big role in the passing offense. But that's it. That's Christian Kirk.
I think it's interesting, too, because Jacksonville paid this kid a lot of money. So clearly they believe in him to be the wide receiver 1 for their football team. Mm-hmm. And when you pay a guy like that, you anticipate that the quarterback is going to throw it to him. You know what I mean? Like they want to utilize. It's like why pay Zeke $300 million or whatever the hell they paid him? I think it was 20-something million a year, and then just not utilize him. It doesn't make any sense. So I think the amount of money that they paid Christian Kirk shows that they want to utilize him in different ways, and I think the coaching staff and everyone will look to Trevor Lawrence and be like, listen, you got to get the ball to this guy. So Rick's right. I definitely see a target share increase for him. The question is, how big is the target share going to be for Christian Kirk? If he stays healthy, I would say in the ballpark of 120 and 140 targets. That would be kind of where my thought process is.
Sure.
My concern is he may be like, I've liked Christian Kirk for many years. I think the last 3 years or so, I have drafted him in the later rounds and been like, okay, I like this guy. And then, you know, obviously Arizona got DeAndre Hopkins and among other things. So like Christian Kirk just never got the opportunity to be the one. And now he is the one on Jacksonville, going to get a high target share. You know, if Trevor Lawrence takes a step forward or not, I still think he's going to get a lot of work. The question is how many opportunities is he going to have in the red zone? How many opportunities is he going to have to score touchdowns? He could be a guy that catches, you know, gets 1,200 receiving yards on the season and catches 80 balls and only scores 3 touchdowns. You know what I mean? So there's the drawback, but that's a great season for a guy that you got in the 10th round. That's wide receiver 2 status. So it's like, I think what you're getting in Christian Kirk in the later rounds is really, really, really good. And I think it's hard when you get into that vicinity to find a guy that is going to get a large target share. You know, you're taking, like, for me, when I get to the later rounds, a lot of guys I'm taking, like, you know, Rondale Moore or Hardman, like, those guys aren't going to reach 110 or more targets. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't believe that they can. With the, you know, other receivers on the team and the other target shares that are, you know, other receivers that got to compete for target share and all of that stuff. It's just like, you know, it's worth taking a shot. But I think this guy on a football team that doesn't have any other receivers. I mean, Christian Kirk's the best wide receiver that Trevor Lawrence has ever had in the NFL. So there's that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's saying anything because the Jacksonville Jaguars had no receivers last year to begin with. So hopefully it turns into good things, and it's worth the shot. And obviously, if he gives you a good floor, I think Christian Kirk's a great player, but we'll have to see how it works out. Like, it's kind of like later on in the draft, you have DJ Chark, and that's an interesting play too. Jameson Williams is hurt; he's not going to start for the regular season. You still got Amon-Ra there. How does DJ Chark factor in? He was the wide receiver 1 for Jacksonville last year.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't great in fantasy football last year.
Christian Kirk only played 2 games.
Yeah. How do you do in the 2 games? I don't even remember.
I don't think it was. I think it was 1 good game, 1 bad game, and then in the first quarter of the 3rd game, he broke his foot.
But I will say, I think Chark and Kirk are both the same players. So, in terms of the type of player they are, if they just weren't on a football team,
that's not. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And I try to be conservative with Christian Kirk because doing my projections, I was like, okay, well, I want to be conservative with this guy and see what it ends up with. And so I gave him less than 120 targets. I gave him 117. And he ended up being my wide receiver 30 with 117 targets, which I think he's getting drafted as the wide receiver 45. So at worst to me, he's a wide receiver 30. Which isn't good, but again, 10th round. So, to me, his floor is pretty high already, and he has a ceiling that I think some people aren't willing to admit that he has. If, again, you believe in Trevor Lawrence, which I do.
Okay. All right, there you go. Late round targets. Always a fun show. Help build your bench a little bit. We didn't get to the late round targets. I like Hardman. Rick does not like Hardman.
No.
But anyway, tomorrow we are going to tell you players that you shouldn't be drafting in drafts. See you later, guys.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.